In the quiet hush of galactic dawn, Earth was found, not by explorers, not by war, but by a signal. A whisper in the black, carrying language, curiosity, and a pulse that didn't match anything known. The galaxy listened, judged, and decided. Primitive, scattered, volatile, yet promising. And so, the invitation was sent. Not an offer. A requirement. Join the Galactic Accord. Be one among many. Kneel, not in body, but in spirit. Humanity, weary from its own fractures, welcomed unity. At first, it felt like peace. Conflict ended. Hunger faded. Borders dissolved. Machines whispered with alien efficiency. Technology flowed like water. Diseases vanished. Cities rose into the clouds, blinking with starlight. And for the first time, humanity stood not on one world, but among many. It looked like progress. It felt like ascension. But beneath the polished steel and holograms, something older had begun to rust. To join the accord was to be streamlined. Culture had to be harmonized. Language was reduced to approved forms. Art filtered for emotional stability. Music adjusted to non-disruptive frequencies. History rewritten, not erased, simply reframed. Human myths became pre-contact folklore. Earth religions were placed in archival vaults labeled cultural preservation. And always, behind every gentle correction, a single idea: unity requires submission. Children learn the languages of the Accord before they learn their own. Home was now Sector Designate 4012A. The moon had a new name, unpronounceable but efficient. Literature became algorithmically compressed. Poems converted into factual statements. War stories were replaced by collaboration simulations. Passion, messy, dangerous passion, was monitored and gently treated. It wasn't cruelty. It was systematization. Efficiency. Peace without chaos. Order without pain. A clean surrender. Humans adapted. That's what they always did. Faces smiled, professions changed, lives continued. They spoke the approved phrases, wore the sanctioned clothes, thought the streamlined thoughts. Earth became a jewel in the Accord's portfolio. Successfully integrated, they called it. And in many ways it was. No more war. No more famine. No more rebellion. Only harmony. Only silence. But not all silence is peaceful. Some silence waits. In the corners of spaceports, older dock workers spoke in hushed tones, not of resistance, not of uprising, but of memories. A guitar string plucked off frequency. A story half told to a child. An old flag, folded and kept in a drawer, hidden beneath layers of compliance. In the void between stars, some ships played recordings banned by the Accord, old speeches, wild music, unfiltered truth. Not often. Just enough. Enough to remind someone somewhere that there had once been a time when humans spoke for themselves. No great fire began. No single voice rose. There were no heroes. No martyrs. Just a feeling. A flicker. A question that no translation could remove: what did we give up to be accepted? And slowly, unnoticed by the galactic bureaucrats and their sterile systems, something began to grow. Not a resistance. Not yet. Something quieter. Heavier. An ache in the chest of a species that had traded its roar for a whisper. A species that had once looked at impossible odds and said, asterisk, we try anyway. Asterisk. The galaxy called it peace. But peace built on bending the knee is only waiting for the spine to remember how to stand. And Earth remembered. It began with a phrase. Simple, quiet, forgotten by most. A murmur passed between hands on maintenance decks, on mining rigs orbiting dead moons, in cramped learning halls beneath alien stars. We remember fire, not a call to arms. Not defiance in itself. Just a memory. A dangerous one. No face claimed it. No leader spread it. It was passed like breath, like warmth in the cold. It appeared etched into the underside of a bench in a transport station, whispered in corrupted system code, scrawled behind a panel on a training drone. Those who saw it didn't know where it started. But they knew what it meant. It meant someone else remembered. And that was enough. On Earth, where compliance was now a habit, people still dreamt in color the Accord hadn't authorized. A child painted flames that didn't match regulation palettes. An old woman hummed a song the monitoring system flagged as disruptive tonal sequence. The world did not rise, but it stirred. In the outer colonies, where Accord enforcers watched more strictly, the resistance took no form. No name. Only acts. A cargo ship drifted off course for 48 seconds, long enough to broadcast an old Earth poem across restricted frequencies. A maintenance algorithm suddenly stopped scrubbing certain forbidden words from message boards. A gardening AI altered the growth patterns of flowers to form shapes that meant nothing to the Accord, but brought tears to human eyes. Memory, weaponized by principle. The Accord's response was immediate. Denials. Silence was emphasized as the highest form of obedience. Earth Council, now fully integrated, issued statements condemning unsanctioned cultural divergence. But they didn't know who to punish. No leaders meant no targets. And even if they had found someone, it wouldn't have mattered. This wasn't revolution. This was something older. Deeper. The slow rise of something forgotten. Some humans were taken. Disappeared. Re-educated, relocated, reassigned. The Accord did it all with sterile efficiency, using euphemisms and reports filled with calming data. Productivity up. Compliance stable. Deviation manageable. But below those numbers, something else was growing. It wasn't just humans. Other species had watched Earth's transformation with interest. Some mocked it. Some pitted. But a few listened. And when they heard the phrase, "we remember fire," something clicked. They too had given up things. Stories. Tongues. Truths. A few began passing the phrase among their own, translated into cadences older than starlight. The spark was human. But the kindling was galactic. And in time, another phrase emerged. One that could not be mistaken. Not coded. Not hidden. Spoken aloud in the break room of a ship docked at Proxima Station by a janitor no one noticed. "We don't kneel." The silence that followed was longer than protocol allowed. Longer than safety permitted. But no one corrected him. The ship left port with its logs wiped clean, its memory banks flickering with static. Somewhere on that journey, someone else heard the words. And repeated them. It was never shouted. Never screamed. Just stated. Soft. Certain. A principle, not a threat. The Accord doubled down. Inspections increased. Surveillance algorithms evolved. Thought stream regulation intensified. But the phrases kept spreading, like light under a closed door. The more they pushed, the more people remembered. That fire was not destruction, it was warmth. That kneeling was not peace, it was silence. That unity was not strength if it meant forgetting who you were. Across frozen moons and hollowed asteroids, the words became ritual. Spoken before long shifts. Etched into tools. Hidden in drone code. Broadcast in the heartbeat of ship engines. No demands. No manifestos. Just the knowledge, we are still here. We remember. And we are not bowed. The Accord could not fight what it could not see. Could not crush what had no form. Could not silence what had no voice, because it was in every voice. The faceless rebellion had begun. Not as war. Not yet. But as principle. And principles do not die easily. The chamber was carved from crystal and steel, suspended in orbit above a blue-white gas giant. Inside, the galactic convergence convened, an event held once every 5 cycles, where species of status gathered to exchange protocol, update unity doctrine, and remind one another that peace still held. It was ceremonial, performative, a theater of order. The humans were present, of course. Quiet. Dignified. A small delegation, polished, restrained, tolerated. Among them stood a translator. Young by human standards, indistinct by design, trained to echo meanings without color or inflection. He had passed every protocol test. He had been loyal, by every definition the Accord recognized. And yet, when the speaker of the Valari High Mind addressed the room with the phrase, "All who kneel before unity shall be uplifted," the translator rendered it into standard galactic not as a neutral phrase, but as a declaration, asterisk. Earth stands free. Asterisk. There was silence. Not confusion. Not shock. Something worse, understanding. Those words had weight. They carried defiance. They spoke of identity. Not an error. Not a glitch. A choice. Security responded swiftly. The translator did not resist. He made no statement. As he was taken, he met no one's eyes. There was no message in his gaze. There didn't need to be one. The message had already been sent. Within hours, the recording spread. It should have been contained. All footage was routed through Accord filters, delayed for safety. But somehow, it escaped. 1,000 ships played the moment across comm screens. Miners in deep space watched it in stunned silence. Children on Earth saw it between lessons on Accord philosophy. Colonists huddled around small devices, replaying it again and again. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't shouted. He had simply spoken. And in doing so, had shattered the illusion of silence. The Accord called it a breach. A language deviation event. The Human Council expressed regret, pledged cooperation, and replaced the delegation immediately. But it was too late. The words had outgrown the chamber. The idea had found ears. And not just human ones. On Varine, where a subjugated species had once sung songs of fire before they were banned, a marketplace went completely still for 6 full minutes. On Lorex Prime, transport workers refused to transmit system logs for an entire day. On a Kelton mining vessel, a human engineer placed a hand on his chest before operating the core drill and whispered, asterisk. We don't kneel. Asterisk. His Kelton supervisor did the same. The Accord noticed the patterns. Something had shifted. Not rebellion. Not yet. But alignment. Across 100 systems, productivity dropped by fractions too small to punish but too deliberate to ignore. Delays in transport. Minor errors in ship navigation. Glitches in thought stream compliance systems. Nothing traceable. Nothing actionable. Just hesitation. Like the moment before a wave crashes. And still, no names emerged. No faces claimed responsibility. There was no leadership, no movement, no manifesto. Just those words passed like a gift and a burden. Earth stands free. We remember fire. We don't kneel. Principles, not slogans. Not directives. Unstoppable because they asked nothing but recognition. The Accord convened an emergency session. Some called for reclassification of humans as destabilizers. Others urged for the quiet eradication of problematic individuals. But none could agree on how. How do you erase a thought? How do you punish a whisper with no source? So they fell back on control, more surveillance, more filtering, more compliance measures. But now every correction felt like confirmation. Every punishment reinforced the message. The translator had not died in vain. He had started a conversation the Accord could not shut down. And then, in one of the oldest habitats orbiting a forgotten dwarf star, an elderly alien teacher closed her terminal after reviewing a filtered curriculum. She turned to her class and spoke in the cadence of her ancestors, words forbidden for generations. She ended the lesson with a phrase she had heard only recently, in a voice not her own, from a species not her own, asterisk. We don't kneel. Asterisk. The class said it back. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, listened. The declaration came without preamble. A transmission, cold and unyielding, delivered across the galactic network by the Accord's Central Intelligence. Earth was to be classified as a containment risk. Human colonies, reassigned under martial regulation. All transit permissions revoked. Trade suspended. Orbitals sealed. The official phrase was asterisk. Stability preservation. But no one mistook its meaning. The Accord had declared war, not with armies, but with control. Not with hatred, but with fear. And still, humanity did not fight. Not in the way the Accord expected. There were no warships launched. No banners raised. No declarations of independence broadcast from planetary capitals. There was only quiet refusal. Transports scheduled to leave dock remained moored, their crews simply absent. Mining equipment malfunctioned en masse, diagnostic logs corrupted by untraceable code. Infrastructure faltered. Logistics broke down. Systems stuttered. The machine of galactic order began to jam, not from force, but from precision disruption, deliberate and faceless. The Accord sent enforcers. They arrived to find factories unmanned, fields unharvested, corridors lined with empty uniforms folded neatly and placed on benches. Workers gone. Data scrubbed. Tools left behind. No one to interrogate. No one to blame. Yet the damage was real. Subtle. Spreading. Human engineers rerouted freight drones to fly in chaotic loops, disrupting interstellar lanes. They never appeared armed, never gave warning, never struck. But the result was the same: cargo delayed, economies strained, empires rattled. Accord AI were compromised not with violence, but with poetry, embedded phrases that caused recursive loops, freezing entire systems with 4 words: "We don't kneel here." Across star systems, species watched and waited. They had seen rebellion before, loud, doomed, bloody. But this was different. This was not a species rising to overthrow. This was a species refusing to obey. Each act small, deniable, faceless. And yet devastating. Like thousands of invisible hands slowly unscrewing the bolts that held the galaxy together. Some non-human factions began to shelter human refugees in defiance of Accord law. Not out of alliance, but out of recognition. The principles spoken in hushed tones by human mouths mirrored the ones buried in their own suppressed histories. They, too, had been told to kneel. Many had forgotten what it meant to stand. But humans hadn't. No names surfaced. No councils formed. No symbols were adopted. Because there was no movement. There was only conviction. The enemy was not the Accord's military. The enemy was the idea that peace must come at the cost of identity. And that enemy could not be shot. Could not be exiled. Could not be negotiated with. It lived in action, in choice, in quiet resistance. Whole planets began to shift. Accord loyalist governments found themselves unable to enforce protocols. Citizens ignored them, not with rebellion, but with practiced indifference. Requests unanswered. Orders delayed. The machinery of compliance breaking down not from sabotage, but from collective decision. In one recorded instance, a task force sent to retake control of a communications hub landed to find the facility empty. No resistance, no confrontation. Only a message scrawled across the central node: "This world hears its own voice now." The Accord's hierarchy began to fracture. Factions blamed each other. Strategies clashed. Civil AI networks argued over proper response. Some called for full eradication. Others urged restraint. But none could define the target. Humanity had become formless, not scattered, but ungraspable. The war they had triggered had no battlefield. And yet, the damage was spreading. Not just physical. Philosophical. Ideas once sealed in doctrine now questioned aloud. Young minds spoke openly of liberty. Accord officials feared their own citizens more than they feared the rebels. Because the rebels wore no uniforms. They made no threats. They simply refused. In the archives of a forgotten moon station, a recording was found of a human child reciting an unauthorized passage from pre-Accord literature. Her voice clear. Her meaning unmistakable. "We don't kneel, not because we are strong. Not because we are righteous. But because standing is what it means to be human." The station's commander erased the footage. Then locked the doors. Then stood in silence, head bowed, not in submission, but in remembrance. And so the faceless war continued. No battles. Only echoes. No victors. Only resolve. The galaxy trembled, not under bombardment, but under the weight of one truth made undeniable. Obedience may bring silence, but silence is not peace. The fleets came as promised, vast, luminous, and terrible. Ships the size of continents, bristling with energy, escorted by swarms of drones and warcraft. They moved with mechanical certainty, a final answer forged in metal and fear. The Accord had decided. Earth was to be pacified. Not corrected. Not re-educated. Removed. Quieted. Permanently. The order had no emotion behind it. It was protocol. The last step when a species no longer served the system. But as the ships approached orbit, they found something unexpected. There were no defenses. No interceptors. No planetary shields raised. Earth was still. Lights flickered across the continents, but no weapons targeted the sky. Scans found no armed resistance, no armies, no traps. The world stood open, vulnerable. And yet something in that stillness disturbed the commanders. It was too calm. Too quiet. As if the planet was not waiting to be attacked, but watching. Then the signal came. One message, broadcast not just across Accord channels but burned into every relay station, drone, and satellite. It bypassed firewalls, overloaded translation matrices, overrode classified protocols. A simple phrase, spoken in a dozen ancient Earth tongues, translated instantly by every listening mind. Asterisk. We don't kneel. Asterisk. The message repeated once. Then went silent. It was not defiance. Not a warning. Just a truth. An unshakable, immovable truth. And then the system collapsed. Accord warships across the sector began shutting down, some sabotaged, others turned by internal mutiny. Entire drone squadrons reprogrammed themselves mid-flight, diverting into deep space. Human colonies long thought pacified erupted not in violence, but in absolute non-cooperation. The infrastructure of war, communication, supply, navigation, fractured under its own weight. Accord allies, long silent, now refused orders. Some stood aside. Others turned their weapons inward. The authority that once ruled with cosmic confidence now stood hollow, rotting from within. It wasn't the might of humanity that broke the Accord. It was the mirror they held up to it. A reflection too honest to bear. A reminder that obedience is not unity, and that peace built on silence cannot endure a whisper of truth. Earth did not fight. Earth endured. And by enduring, it unmade an empire. The Accord didn't fall in one moment. It crumbled slowly, in fragments and realizations. Its leaders vanished into history, their names unspoken, their systems picked apart not by fire, but by disinterest. No one feared them anymore. And when fear is gone, power dissolves. Across the stars, colonies once bound by doctrine began speaking in new voices. Not always human voices, but free ones. Children grew up learning not the rules of suppression, but the stories of how the quietest rebellion shook the loudest throne. Stories with no heroes. No faces. Just choices. Just principles. On Earth, the skies were clear. Cities were quiet. Machines hummed not with conquest, but with renewal. 100 languages returned. Songs long banned were sung again in open air. Statues were never built. Memorials never raised. No one claimed victory. Because there had never been a war, only a decision carried by many hands. In orbit, one satellite remained, a simple beacon, endlessly transmitting the final phrase of a forgotten generation. It didn't demand. It didn't explain. It simply existed, impossible to erase. Asterisk. We don't kneel. Asterisk. And in that phrase, the galaxy found its future. Not because it was commanded, but because it remembered.